And now we got Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation joining us right now here on Birds 365. BLJ joining the show. BLJ, how you doing on this Wednesday, brother? Welcome to the show.
Doing good, guys. Excited to see the Philadelphia Eagles out there on the practice field.
On the field, a rainy day. Hopefully it's outside. I want to see 90 people crammed into that bubble, BLG. But you'll be able to see over everybody. That's the advantage BLG has over all of us. But since we were talking about, since we got into the backup running back situation, I'm of the thought that the Eagles would like it to be Will Shipley, and they don't want to hand anything to anybody, and that's why A.J. Dillon is here. We have to see if he's healthy. That's a big thing. He's out there. We'll see how A.J. Dillon looks. To me, the spring is never the time to evaluate running backs. But what is your thought on the backup running back situation as a whole?
Yeah, I feel like Will Shipley kind of projects as a direct Kenny Gainwell replacement in terms of a guy who could be your running back in a 2-minute drill, pass catching value, going to do the dirty work in terms of obviously has to get better as a pass protector, but I think has that willingness to do that and also can help on special teams as Kenny Gainwell did as well. So I think Will Shipley will be doing some of that dirty work and then in turn earn some of the, actual carries that you get as a reward for doing that kind of stuff. But I do think, assuming he's healthy, assuming he makes the team, which I don't think he's a lock, I think A.J. Dillon has a role too where he rotates in certain situations, maybe even perhaps, end of game situations if the Eagles are up and they're trying to look to run the clock and not have to, use Saquon and tax him with those kind of carries.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think 400 plus carries for Saquon is going to be an issue 2 years in a row, BLG?
I mean, history tells us that, there's probably going to be a drop-off. I mean, I think it's 8 or 9 other players have had more touches in a single NFL season than Saquon Barkley did last year. So absolutely, I would think there's going to be some kind of drop-off, again, and just because the bar is literally the best running back season ever. But Saquon is a freak, and you look at, how Derrick Henry has been plugging away season after season. And I think he's a little bit more like that. So I tend to think he's still going to be pretty good. It's just a matter of, I think they're going to try to give him the ball a little bit less. And I think he's going to, probably not be quite what he was last year.
Do you think that pitch count is going to be managed or is it going to be natural? In other words, Nick has been pretty constant, like, we're going to do what we need to do to win the game. So it might just work out itself in that the games are closer. Maybe you're behind a little bit more often. And those numbers come down from that standpoint, just from the natural regression versus the actual pitch count. Which do you think is more likely?
I think last year they probably didn't plan to use him quite to the extent that they did from like the outset of the season. But when you're winning like you are and you need him like you are, then you kind of just have to go with that. And it's hard to get away from that, especially given the degree of success which they were having. My guess is that they're going to go into this one knowing they're, again, going to have to pass the ball a little bit more and not be able to rely on him quite as much. But if it gets to the point where they have to do it, and it's winning them a lot of games, then they're probably just going to fall back into what they did last year to some extent and just have to ride that if it's working.
BLG, we were talking about corner a little bit earlier on the show as well. Here's my thought process. The guy hasn't played at all, basically. He played more as a rookie than he did last year. I think he played 14 snaps. Eli Ricks. But they kept him here for 2 years, and not 2 years on the practice squad, 2 years on the roster, and they've used up a roster spot on him. That, to me, that means something. Have people forgotten about Eli Ricks, or am I just because they need? It's not only Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, Avonte Maddox. They need bodies at corner. Are people forgetting about Eli Ricks a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And look, I didn't really think Eli Ricks did a whole lot to justify his roster spot last year, considering too he didn't even really play a ton on special teams when he was up.
Yeah, he's not a good special teams player, and they keep him.
Exactly. He's young. He does have inside, outside versatility, at least in terms of experience. So, they like him more than I do. I think, and I even felt this way last year, and I feel even more so probably this year, especially as he goes into the final year of his rookie contract here as an undrafted rookie free agent. He'll be a restricted free agent after this offseason. The Eagles haven't really liked to pay those guys because you have to pay them, a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And probably therefore you might just not tender him and let him go to unrestricted free agency. So to me, it feels like this is the time more now than ever to maybe trade him. And obviously you're not going to get, some amazing haul, but maybe you could get like a backup player at another position where you're a little bit more thin than you are at cornerback. So to me, that makes the most sense for him.
BLG, any big storylines or any big players maybe that you're watching going into OTAs? I thought Mike Gill brought up a good point of like, you're not going to learn too much, but maybe a player gets on the radar for coaches, that they can prove themselves at some point throughout training camp or throughout the summer. Any players stick out to you from that perspective? Or what do you think going into OTAs?
Yeah, I was looking back at my OTA practice notes from this time last year. And because, I think people are like, oh, it doesn't matter that much. And, I'm biased because we get to go. And I want to say it matters, of course, because I'm there. What am I going to do? Be like, oh, this is just a waste of time. I'm going. But I do think there are things you start to pick up. I mean, certainly we saw Isaiah Rodgers really like pop onto the scene last year, certainly after he had missed all the 2023 season 2. One of the big takeaways I had from last year also were like some of just the first impressions where like Saquon Barkley just looked very different than any other Eagles running back I had ever really seen in terms of just being huge. Bryce Huff stood out to me as a guy who looked kind of smaller than I thought would be for a guy that, the Eagles paid as their top free agent contract last offseason. So I think you kind of get some of these first impressions. Even I guess Zach Bond last year stood out in a way where he was running down the sideline with Saquon Barkley. And at the time I was like, is this maybe the best sign for Saquon Barkley? It turns out that it was just not giving enough credit to Zach Bond for being able to run with him in this kind of setting. So I do think there are things we can see in this practice that kind of give us a little, at least of a first impression, set the table to what else to watch this offseason.
Yeah, I think A.J. Dillon's quads are going to be a story this year. I think he's going to show them off. That's my prediction. Also, Ty Robinson from that perspective.
Sure.
The Vanilla Gorilla is going to excite people. But you mentioned trades there. That piqued my interest. Didn't think about that perspective for Eli Ricks, but I have thought about it from Jahan Dotson's standpoint. I think all the way back to the draft, I was like, this is a sneaky trade candidate. Last year, obviously he's not going to be back. If you can get something for him. But for that to happen, somebody, whether it's Terrace Marshall, Danny Gray, somebody like that would have to jump up and play well. Anybody else? Tanner McKee. Kellen Moore, his quarterback room, BLG, is Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Hayner. I had to look up Jake. I mean, who knows? Maybe you love Tanner McKee. He picks up the phone and says, hey, Howie, I'll give you a third-round pick. Would you do that?
No.
You have Dorian. No? You have Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You have Kyle McCord. No?
I need a second at least. I mean, McKee looks like he can play. And to have that behind, like, McKee's contract is such a bargain for a backup. Like, these backup quarterbacks are making what, like $5-6 million more? He's making peanuts, and he might be good. And, Jalen Hurts has had some injury issues, not like major, but some here and there. He's missed some games. I would rather keep McKee unless it's a 2.
How about Dotson?
I mean, I'm really interested to see if Jalen Hurts and Dotson can form a chemistry after clearly not having that last year when the Eagles got him. So I'm really interested to see how that goes this offseason and kind of then figure out, okay, does this guy actually fit in the offense at all? And obviously it's not like he has to be this major volume target because that's just not his role. That's not going to be his role as long as AJ and Devontae and Dallas Scott are all healthy. But I mean, there's room to be better as a guy who occasionally gets a target and you can mix into the offense from time to time. And we saw, Dotson look really good in week 18 last year. And obviously, you're playing against the Giants and their backups and, it's low stakes football relative to the rest of the season. But he clearly, is a former first round pick. He has some ability. I really just want to see if those two can get on the same page.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. BLG, I want to shift gears a little bit. Last week you came on and you kind of berated the NFL and the owners a little bit for coming at the Eagles on the tush push. I loved it. It was a great segment here on Birds 365. Well, now the latest is they're talking about void years, all within 10 days of one another. BLG, Goodell gets shot down on that, and now we're talking about void years. What's your first reaction on that, and does it feel to you like they are targeting the Eagles with this move?
Well, I mean, they certainly were with the tush push. Yeah, and I think that's pretty inarguable and not just a coincidence that every team on the Eagles schedule this year, save for the Detroit Lions, voted to ban the tush push. Dan
Campbell, baby, he don't care.
That's right. And all respect to Dan Campbell. He walks the walk. He talks the talk, walks the walk. In terms of the void year thing and what they're doing the salary cap, I mean, I'm almost a little bit less surprised by that one, just in terms of how much talk there's been of the Eagles' manipulation of the cap over the years. I do think if you're an Eagles fan, it's hard to feel like it's just all a mere coincidence that your team is having this success and the NFL is looking into changing things. That's not an unprecedented kind of maneuver. Like, that happens in the course of history of sports. There's teams that find an edge and then take advantage of it, then it can get taken away. But as long as they do it in a way where there is a basis and it's not just targeting one team, I think that's okay. But I do think in this case there definitely has to be some level of jealousy or whatever it is you want to call it against the Eagles.
Well, there's always jealousy towards the Super Bowl champions. I certainly am on board with that. Doesn't matter who it is. Generally, there tends to be some jealousy, especially when you have consistent success. So, Kansas City's dealt with it. New England's dealt with it. The Eagles are dealing with it. I agree with that. But this is an issue that's been there, like, behind the scenes for years. Like, I think timing is a big part of it because Jason Fitzgerald decided to write about it because of what Roger Goodell said. And all of a sudden it pops up to the forefront. Whereas, this has been an issue behind the scenes far longer. I think Jason put out the numbers. I think in 2013, 8 teams used voidable years, and the total number of money was 40 million BLG. Now it's 26 teams and 2.2 billion of voidable year money. So I think it's become that issue where some of the lesser owners from a financial perspective, the Mike Browns of the world, the Mark Davises of the world, they see this big competitive gap because they can't necessarily do the same things as some of the more financially well-heeled owners, especially when it comes to the voidable years. So I do think it's been around for a long time, but when it pops up, the timing, I get why Eagles fans feel like they're being targeted. But in this case, I don't see it at all. This is just one of those issues where And when they open up to CBA, I think a lot of fans also said, I want to explain that because I got a bunch of fans say, well, you'll never get 8 owners. This has nothing to do. It's not a rule change. This is a CBA thing where they're negotiating with the union and trying to lower salaries. That's what it's about. I mean, they want salaries to go back to a more manageable level. And I don't think that's going to happen because the union's not going to, the union's not going to agree with it. So, I don't think this one is targeting the Eagles at all, other than they've been very successful with voidable years. And that to me has more to do with evaluation. Like if the Eagles extended bad players with voidable years, they'd be screwed. But
and they have with some.
With some, but very few. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Jalen Hurts. It's all worked. So to me, they deserve credit for the evaluation of the players. And the players keep getting better and better and better. They deserve credit for that.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. It's the timing, the timing of it. It could be probably better, especially coming off the heels of what happened last week. But ultimately, I think, That's a really good point. The evaluation is the biggest thing.
I just wonder how much of that they're going to be able to do without the void years. Like right now, they have AJ, Devontae, 4 highly paid offensive linemen, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert. A lot of that is because they can manipulate the cap. Now, where John is right is absolutely their evaluation on all those players has been spot on. But with the new rules, are they going to be able to evaluate that many players? I don't think they'll be able to.
We'll see, how it shakes out. I think, you have to feel good about their model in terms of, the spending is a big part of it too. And I don't think any team is truly like great at the draft just because there's a lot of luck involved. But I do think, some teams are better than others generally, and the Eagles have been kind of proving to be that kind of team. And as long as they can continue to identify talent in the draft, cheap young talent, and Howie Roseman is going to be probably always one of the better GMs, if not the best GM, at acquiring extra picks and getting good value in that way and being able to maximize those picks. And then ultimately maybe playing the comp pick game like they're doing this year as well. I think ultimately, you have a system there of player development and drafting and developing that you can feel good about as your court.
Is BLG going to be upset if Bryce Hupp is a starting edge player today?
I'm not going to be upset, but my whole stance with him, as I've said many times on the show, is I don't think Vic Fangio wants to play him. So I just don't think that seems like kind of a deal breaker. That's not like, oh, we'll work around that. I mean, Vic Fangio, again, clearly just did not want to play this guy. He was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl.
I only say that because I think it might get overblown because I don't think Nolan Smith is going to be healthy. They're not going to push Nolan Smith. So I don't think he's going to be out there.
And you're assuming Bryce Huff is there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that too. But I would think he'd want to be there. But yeah, he doesn't have to show up if he's upset about the lack of playing time. You're right from that perspective. But if he is there, and Nolan Smith, I don't expect to practice. Then it's Jalix Hunt and somebody else. And generally, the Eagles default to the guy who's been here over guys who haven't been here. So I think that might be a chance for some overreaction today if Bryce Hupp is out there. And I don't think it'll mean that much, but I think there's the opportunity for that. Agree or disagree?
I think that's something to bear in mind too with a lot of positions. I mean, I'm looking back here from last year, and it was AJ Brown and Joseph Ngata, as the number one wide receivers, and Paris Campbell was the first team too. I guess Devontae was
Devontae, yeah, he had a day off. Some guys are there, but they take certain days off. They have something to do. If you're entrenched, you can do that. Fletcher Cox used to say, I pop my head in, I pop it out occasionally. So not everybody's going to be there every day, but they're the Eagles usually have very good attendance for voluntary work as a whole. But veteran players, yeah, some of them will take a day off here and there. Might be too cold, too rainy today. So who knows? But we'll see how it shakes out. Most of the I'd like to look at the default settings, but most of them. Like I think it's going to be Ringo at corner. I think it's going to be Sidney Brown to start at safety, Jeremiah Trotter at linebacker because of the injuries. Right guard, though, it's probably going to be Tyler Steen, but they have so many bodies.
Yep.
Is that a chance for a surprise at right guard with Jeff Stout?
I think you can make the case it's like the biggest surprise could happen there in terms of a player who you did not expect to be in the starting lineup for the Eagles this season. I think that has the potential to be, because let's say, Tyler Steen doesn't look that great. And let's say that Kenyon Green continues to be the player he was with the Texans, which wasn't very good, or either of those players, maybe both, struggle with injury. Well, Matt Pryor is a guy with a lot of starting experience who maybe it's him who ends up taking the job there and was once an Eagles draft pick, of course, and comes back to Philadelphia after having all this experience and developing as a player. And by the way, kind of, I think projects as a guy that Jeff Stoutland likes in terms of being like a tackle-sized guard, this massive guy.
It all
there.
fits. That's where I was going, PLG. You're
I picked up what you were putting down.
Yeah. It all fits. And he played well on a bad team last year, playing right guard.
Right.
If you look at the PFF numbers, at least, I'm not watching every snap of the Chicago Bears, but he played well at right guard. Everything fits. He's got the big body.
Mm-hmm.
Shep's got a history with him. If I could get that futures bet, I'd make that futures bet on Matt Pryor.
Oh yeah. There's good odds on that one.
Yeah. But more people are thinking about it. I'm glad you went down that route. Let's go to the defensive interior. Do you think it's just as simple as Morrow plays more, Jordan plays more, and that's it, as far as getting that gap of playing time from Milton Williams?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it seems to be like, okay, Jomo goes up to the Milton Williams role. You have Jordan Davis again, probably, like you said, probably going to have to play just more than he did last year, assuming Vic Fangio trusts him to do that. I would think you don't pick up his fifth-year option like you do if he's going to play the same exact snap count he did last year, which was lower. And then, you're hoping that Ty Robinson can kind of take the Ajomo role from last year. So, yeah, I do think it's kind of going to have to be people stepping up. Thomas Booker probably also stepping up from what maybe he did last year. We'll see if Byron Young makes the roster after the Eagles kind of stashed him away on their roster for a bit last year, former third-round pick. So, yeah, I think it's, it is going to be about these guys from inside, basically, for the most part, stepping up and taking on bigger roles.
Yeah, going to be a lot of that this year. BLG, I want to ask you about the secondary. Do you think Makuba's day one starter here, or do you think Sidney Brown's still going to be that guy?
I think it's just so rare to see rookies in starting positions. Like, the Eagles drafted Quinyon Mitchell last year, the first-round pick. A lot of excitement. It was Isaiah Rodgers as a starting quarterback on day one of OTAs. Same thing, like in the slot. It was not Cooper DeJean. It was Avonte Maddox. So I just think generally the rookie players, you just don't get that first team status from the jump. And I think that's a good thing, by the way. I think you have to make them feel like they have to earn it a little bit and give the veterans the nod and push the rookies to just be, feel like they're not just being handed everything. So I'm going to guess we're going to see Sidney Brown out there next to Reed Blankenship with the first team to start out.
Anything you're looking from Kevin Patullo today? We're going to talk to Kevin before practice. He's been here. It's not like last year where Kellen Moore was coming from completely outside the building with some, orders to bring essentially fresh ideas and things like that. Anything pique your interest on Kevin Patullo's first public day, essentially as offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, looking back at last year's notes again, just to frame of reference, when the Eagles had two coordinators in that practice, there wasn't a whole lot I got schematically out of that, especially you're not even doing 11-on-11 work. But, I think it's still interesting to maybe watch the coach, how they interact with players, where they're standing up in terms of, are they more involved in the huddle? Are they off to the side? Kind of see like their approach to this. And yeah, I think we're, in terms of scheme, we're not only going to be able to see so much, but also interested to hear from him in the press conference today, his first press conference as offensive coordinator, and kind of just to get to know a little bit more about him as a whole.
Yeah. One last one from me at Brandon Gowton. Make sure you follow BLG on the X platform, bleedinggreennation.com. You can read him there. He and his staff do a tremendous job. You don't even have to watch OTAs. You don't have to watch training camp. BLG's got his initial 53 there for you. There's always, though, I don't want to discount your 53, but there's always a position or a player, maybe always a rookie, where the coaches get a look at him and say, oh shit, this guy's not ready. Mm-hmm. That happens a lot in this league. If there's one position you would say Howie's going to go outside the organization to bolster after Vic Fangio, because it's not going to be offense. They're loaded on offense. They got even at right guard, they got, as we said, they got like 50 alternatives. So it's most likely going to be defense. If there's one position where they're going to have to go outside the organization, what would be your bet right now?
When I look at the depth chart I was creating with that 53-man roster on BooneyRNation.com, the two spots I thought where I was like, man, kind of thin here, where edge rusher, where these have already made, some offseason additions with Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, and the draft Antoine Powell-Ryland. So maybe not there, but safety, jumps out as what if, Sidney Brown doesn't really step up? What if Drew Makuba, it's too much to just put on his plate as a rookie starting in the secondary for Vic Fangio? And anyway, like just even the depth of their position there, you're not feeling necessarily amazing about that. So I think it has to be safety where, and also just again, Justin Simmons is out there. Julian Blackman out there still, I believe.
Yeah,
so
he is.
There are options too.
Yeah. Maxon Hook, I should say that. Quinyon Mitchell's roommate from Toledo. The undrafted contracts come out. So not that means everything, but yeah, I think it was Maxon Hook, Montrell Johnson, and Holland Pierce as the guys who got the biggest guarantees. So if you're looking for undrafted people, I would say focus on those three.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I don't even think, did the Eagles keep an undrafted guy? I don't think they did last year. They were so deep.
It was the first time in a while they had not.
Yeah.
Usually, they keep at least one on their roster, but no. But there was talk about how he kind of set the table for that in terms of like weaker draft class. We signed guys.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So
BLG, last question for me, man. With Jahad Campbell's status being kind of up in the air, we just talked about Makuba. What rookie this year has the biggest impact on this football team this season specifically?
I'm going to go with Campbell still, even the injury being unsure, just because I think the upside, the talent with him could be great. I'm still believing, again, I don't have the info on the injury either, so I'm kind of taking a shot in the dark here, but just based on, we saw the success of Zach Bond. It's not as simple as Zach Bond did it. I mean, Jahad Campbell can definitely do the same thing, but I think that kind of mold of a player can clearly have success in this defense. And I think Campbell, is a really intriguing, exciting prospect to be adding to this defense and this ecosystem. So I know it's chalk to say the first round pick, but I still, even injury factored in, I still believe in him a lot.
With Makuba, real quick, let me sneak in with Makuba. Sorry. Because the only thing, do you think people are he's a second round pick. I hate labels in the NFL. He's the 64th pick. He's one pick away from being the third round pick. Like there's a big difference between being 33 and 64. And everybody's like, oh, day one starter. Is there too much pressure being put on a kid like that?
I think from that standpoint, I don't think from the organization as much as the framing you're talking about with the fans. It's a lot to expect a rookie to definitely start. Like I know Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were amazing for the Eagles last year. That's great. They could be even better this year. They're going to have probably awesome careers. It's a great starting point. Also, development isn't linear. And also, that's not the norm. That can't be the standard. It's not like, well, every rookie the Eagles are going to draft early on is going to come in and be amazing from the jump. And if it works out that way, great. And I'm wrong. But that is just not, the norm. And that's not the standard you should be holding them to. You should be expecting there could be some bumps. It might not happen as fast as you want it to happen. That should be more of the expectation. And then if they do more than that, great.
BLG, good stuff today, man. We appreciate you joining in on Birds 365 as always every Wednesday. Great stuff today. Make sure you guys follow BLG at Brandon Gowton and read all his work at Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, we'll catch up with you next week, man. Enjoy OTAs today and stay dry out there. Right?
I'll try it. I'll see you there, John.
See you down there.
There's BLG joining us here on Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Moving right along this